Congressman Lee Zeldin is a Republican who represents the state of New York. He says he wants the memo supporting evidence released right away. Congressman, thanks a lot for joining us tonight.
Good to be with you, Tucker.
So you say that the documents we were just talking about, for example, the evidence the FBI brought to the FISA court to justify spying on this American citizen, Carter Page, ought to be released to the public. What's the argument against that?
The argument against it would be that there could be some information over the course of the FISA application as you're reviewing all of the documents that will include sources and methods that may need to get redacted. In the effort to argue against providing any of the related material that was sourced, some might say that we shouldn't be releasing any of it. The counter argument that I would provide, though, to that is that anything at all that can possibly be released to the American public, it's one thing when you read the majority memo that was released today. It's another thing when you get an opportunity to read the Schiff memo when that comes out. But when you actually are seeing the documents created by the Obama Justice Department and the Obama FBI, and you're seeing the FISA abuse and the misconduct at the highest levels of these agencies for yourself, and the documents are actually created by them, then the American public is able to form their own independent judgment on their own without having to rely on what might be filters of Adam Schiff through a third party in the media, through a Twitter account, and then you're being educated on believing that, say, the memo that got released today was going to have all these sources and methods that shouldn't, or when Schiff was complaining that it was going to, you get the point. I mean, when he was talking about, those details, I mean, it's when reality comes out and the memos you could see for yourself.
Well, and how about this? So quickly, the thing that Democrats are pushing back against tonight is really the pivotal line in the memo that says Andrew McCabe, in behind closed doors testimony to the Intel Committee, said the memo was the basis, in effect, the dossier was the basis of the request for the before the FISA court. Can we get a copy of that part, the relevant part of his testimony?
Absolutely, and we should. The transcript should come out and people could see for themselves. And once again, Adam Schiff and the House Intel Democrats, they're just lying. As they said, they were complaining that Devin Nunes and the majority were making changes to the document, even though it was just grammatical changes, and those other substantive changes that were made were changes requested by the minority on the Intel Committee, as well as the most substantive change, which was done by the FBI.
Exactly. Congressman, thanks for coming on. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Tucker.
The apparent ease with which the FBI was able to monitor Carter Page without his knowing it should have the rest of us asking, when is it acceptable to spy on U.S. citizens? Has the norm become that it's always acceptable for the U.S. government to spy on its own people? Glenn Greenwald writes for The Intercept. He spent a lot of time covering the American surveillance state, and he joins us tonight. Glenn, thanks for coming on.
Great to be with you, Tucker.
So I should, in the interest of honesty, note the obvious irony, which is the Republican Congress just reauthorized the law that made this possible in the first place, and did so with very little public debate on the subject. And so that raises kind of a more basic question, which is, why is this question, when and how and for what reason the U.S. government spies on its own people, why is that so rarely debated in public?
It's a great question. I mean, it's the reason why Edward Snowden decided to risk going to prison, because he was so concerned that this huge, massive surveillance state was being constructed in secret, directed not just at foreign adversaries, but inward, domestically at the American people, without anybody knowing about it. And so he came forward because he was so concerned that Congress and the Senate never debated it, never discussed what the parameters are. And the irony is that we've had Democrats on the one hand spending the last year warning that Trump is this lawless tyrant endangering democracy. We've had the Republicans saying the deep state is endangering democracy by abusing its power, and yet Democrats, the leadership anyway, not the majority, got together with the Republican majority, including Devin Nunes, who authored the memo today, and just not more than 2 weeks ago voted to increase spying power and block all safeguards on how it's used. So it's really incredible now to watch this debate unfold.
Well, it's actually almost nauseating, and as I said, totally ironic. So you know a lot about how this works, what is legal and what is not legal. What does the U.S. government need to show to a judge or a series of judges in order to get permission to legally spy on a U.S. citizen?
So in order to target a U.S. citizen the way that they targeted Carter Page, which means essentially that they're going to listen to all of his phone calls, read his emails, monitor him digitally, they need to demonstrate to a FISA court, which is a court that meets in secret with just the Justice Department present, that there's probable cause to believe that he's an agent of either a foreign government or a terrorist organization. So they convinced a judge, obviously, a FISA court judge, that there's probable cause to believe that Carter Page is an agent of the Russian government.
How often are those requests turned down? Do we know?
Almost never. There's something like a 99.8% approval rate. The FISA court is a joke in terms of whether or not it provides real safeguards or oversight for how the NSA and the FBI can spy on American citizens. They basically rubber stamp whatever it is that's put in front of them. And so Democrats used to say that a lot. When George Bush and Dick Cheney got caught spying on Americans without going to the FISA court, the argument of the Bush administration was it's so burdensome. And Democrats said, well, it's so easy. They never turn you down. And now Democrats are trying to say, oh, it's a very rigorous process. It's not. They almost never, ever say no.
Yeah. Glenn Greenwald, who's been a brave voice from the left on this subject for many years. Thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Good to be with you, Tucker.
So what exactly in this memo was so dangerous that you weren't supposed to see it? It would endanger this country for you to read it. We'll ask someone who's been making that case next.